What's up guys, my name's Brandon and I've been using the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 13 Pro for an entire month, and I wanted to give you guys my full in-depth comparison to help you decide which one you should buy. And this year, the decision between these two is much different than it was last year, and there are 5 main reasons why. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So let's start with the pricing. So the iPhone 13 starts at $829 or $799 if you activate with a carrier right away for 128 gigabytes, and then goes up to 512 gigabytes for $1129, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro is about $200 more. So it starts at $999 for 128 gigabytes, and then goes up to 1 terabyte for the first time this year, and that will run you $1,500 for the Pro and $1,600 for the Pro Max. The 13 will give you more fun color options like a pink, blue, and red, in addition to the midnight and starlight colors, whereas the iPhone 13 Pro comes in kind of more muted colors like the new Sierra Blue, along with gold, silver, and graphite. Now, as far as the design goes, just like last year, the borders on the iPhone 13 are made of aluminum, whereas the 13 Pro has stainless steel borders for a much more premium look and feel. Now that does make the Pro model a little bit heavier, coming in at 204 grams compared to 174 grams on the regular 13, and the difference is noticeable. I can notice it in my hands and in my pockets, but I wouldn't really call it a deal breaker. There's also a big difference in the coating on the back of the phone. So the iPhone 13 has a glossy glass back, whereas the Pro has a matte glass black. So it's like a matte coating that gives it a more dry look, and in my opinion, it looks a lot more premium, and especially when holding it in the hand, it just feels more premium than the basic glossy glass back of the regular iPhone 13. Not to mention, the Pro doesn't get nearly as many fingerprints or smudges on the back of the phone thanks to that coating. However, you do get a lot more smudging around the borders of the Pro due to them being made of stainless steel. We also have an additional telephoto lens on the camera array of the Pro model, while the 13 has a wide and ultra wide camera, so a dual camera setup, and they are diagonal for the first time this year, and I actually like it. I like it better than the vertical setup like we had on the 12. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the size of the lenses are massive on the Pro model this year. They are huge. They protrude out a lot more than the regular 13, and when you set them on a flat surface, it will rock back and forth if you do not have a case on. If you do have a case on, you're not going to notice it as much, but that is a pretty big design difference between these two, are the massive camera lenses. So overall, I would have to say that the iPhone 13 is the more comfortable phone of these two because it is lighter and those cameras don't protrude out as much. However, it could be a little bit more slippery than the iPhone 13 Pro, although both are pretty slippery when you don't have a case on. However, if you want to reduce the amount of slipperiness and you want to protect your phone at the same time, I have the perfect solution. Casetify. Casetify has all kinds of awesome cases for the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro, but their new line, the Crush series, kicks everything up a notch. So these cases are not only stylish as can be and customizable, but these Crush cases are lined with a patented shock absorbing technology, so your phone will be a-okay with drops up to 10 feet. And to make things even better, these cases are also made of 65% recycled and plant-based materials. So basically, if you recycle an old iPhone case that you don't need anymore, it could possibly end up being used to make an all-new Casetify case, which is pretty crazy. And if you still do have, old cases lying around, make sure to recycle them using the Recasetify program from Casetify. That way you can help protect the planet and reduce waste. I really love Casetify cases because they're almost like a statement piece at this point. I mean, everybody knows the brand, but nobody's going to have the same case because they're just so customizable and they're always adding new designs to choose from. Not to mention, they're actually high quality cases and you can tell when you're holding them. They're not slippery, the clear cases don't get yellow after a few months, and they protect you from drops. I mean, you really can't ask for too much more. So if you want to check these cases out for yourself, or if you want to maybe get one for a gift for somebody for the upcoming holiday season, go to casetify.com/BrandonButch to get 15% off your order. Thanks to Casetify for sponsoring this segment of the video. All right, so turning these two back over to the display, there's a major difference when it comes to the display. So both have the same 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display with the same 2532 by 1170 resolution and the same 460 pixels per inch, and also the same 2,000,000:1 contrast ratio. So on the surface, they look and feel identical when you just have them sitting here at the home screen, but the big difference here is that the 13 Pro has the ProMotion technology, which offers that silky smooth 120 Hz refresh rate. And the cool thing about the ProMotion display is that it has a variable refresh rate, meaning that the phone automatically changes the refresh rate based on the activity you're doing on the phone. So if you're just sitting at the home screen, the 13 Pro will drop the refresh rate down to 10 Hz, or it's going to refresh 10 times per second instead of 60 or 120 to preserve battery life, but then it will kick it up to 120 Hz while playing an intensive game or when you do something that involves a lot of rapid movement. So that is really, really cool and really alleviates any concern that this would cause battery drain. And this is something that a lot of people thought would be, not noticeable to your average consumer, but let me tell you, it is. Every single person I handed this phone to has noticed a difference in the smoothness of the 13 Pro compared to their 60 Hz iPhone 13, iPhone 12, or any other previous iPhone. And when I use the Pro for a week and then switch back to the 13, like myself, it feels like my eyes have issues and that things are blurry when they shouldn't be. It's really that big of a difference to me. And, it's going to be a big difference to anybody that pays attention to detail, So if somebody doesn't really care, they don't use their phone that often, they may not be able to tell, but I can tell you right now, every single person I handed this phone to could tell a difference. We also see an increase in brightness from 800 nits to 1000 nits on the Pro model and up to 1200 nits when watching HDR content. But one thing that was not mentioned by Apple is that the thermals on the iPhone 13 Pro are also slightly better than on the 13. Now the Pro did not dim as quickly when under direct sunlight or duress, and even when it did, the brightness did not drop down as low as it did on the regular 13. Now, both of these are going to be upgrades from the 12. They both, have better thermals than the 12, but even from the 13 to the 13 Pro, the 13 Pro just performs better under duress or under direct sunlight and when it's, heated up a lot. All right, so now let's go ahead and discuss those cameras because this is always one of the biggest differences between the base model and the Pro model, and that's no different this year. So let me start off by saying that both phones produce incredible photos and videos, even compared to the regular iPhone 12 and the 12 Pro. But this year, the big differences, aside from that third camera lens, are the additions via software, and I want to talk about those first. So let's start by talking about ProRes video. So this is a high quality video format that retains more color and detail than your typical H.264 or H.265 codec. Not to mention, it uses less compression, so it's going to be much easier to work with in post-production. So that's all great, but there is a big downside, and that is the amount of space that it takes up. And this could explain the reason you can only shoot ProRes video in 1080p on the base 128GB 13 Pro. Only the 256GB models and up can shoot in 4K. Now, of course, that could also be, something to do with the power needed to shoot this strenuous video natively on the iPhone. But anyways, 1 minute of storage of this ProRes video equates to about 6 GB of storage. So shooting video in ProRes, especially 4K ProRes, is going to eat through your storage very, very quickly, unless you have a 1 TB model. But even there, it's going to eat through pretty quick. Now, I did test ProRes video in a number of situations, and I found that the most noticeable difference in quality before color grading is in low light situations. So there is less noise, the colors are much more lifelike, and the overall quality, the overall picture is just better. But will your average person, your everyday person who isn't super into video notice the difference? Probably not. Actually, they definitely will not. And even if they did, it's likely not worth the storage trade-off. So ProRes is a feature that I would only get excited for if you are a cinematographer or if you just edit and color grade your videos after shooting them on your iPhone. Otherwise, the regular 4K video that you shoot natively from the camera here is going to be more than enough for 99.9% of people. Now, another great feature that is a combination of both software and hardware is macro mode. And this is hands down my favorite feature of the iPhone 13 Pro, aside from that 120 Hz display, because of just simply how much fun I have shooting these macro shots. So thanks to that ultra wide lens getting improved and adding autofocus, we are now able to get super close to objects and have the ultra wide lens focus on the subject from just millimeters away, and the results are pretty breathtaking. And if you don't like how the phone switches to macro mode automatically when you get close to a subject, you can actually toggle this off in settings. So this is especially helpful for video, since I found that it can kind of ruin videos with that weird animation when it goes into macro mode and you don't want it to. So definitely keep that toggle in mind. But aside from ProRes video and that macro mode, the only other major differences have to do with that telephoto lens and the crazy zoom capabilities that it brings. So you have a 3x optical zoom in with a 6x optical zoom range, and also a digital zoom up to 15x. So that is 3 times further digital zoom than the regular iPhone 13. And for video, the Pro also gets you 3x optical zoom and 9x digital zoom, which is really awesome. All right, so now that I've gassed up the iPhone 13 Pro so much, it's time to point out the fact that the iPhone 13 shares almost all of the same features as the 13 Pro when you subtract that telephoto lens from the equation. So they both get the new photographic styles feature, which is exclusive to the iPhone 13s this year, and this will allow you to set photo filters before you take a photo, and you can customize it to your liking straight from the camera app or in settings, and it applies to every future photo you take until you turn it off or change it. We also get cinematic video on both the 13 and 13 Pro, which allows you to shoot video that, well, looks more cinematic. So there's a lot of bokeh involved, and AI is actually used to detect when a subject's head turns to look at somebody else, and then it will shift the focus to the person that they look at. Or like if somebody comes in frame, it will automatically detect that and put the focus on their face. It's really, really cool, and it makes taking videos really fun. Probably a lot more fun than it should be. But just keep in mind, this mode is limited to 1080p for now. Maybe we'll see 4K cinematic in the iPhone 14, but it is limited to 1080 right now. But anyways, both phones can also shoot HDR video. They both have sensor shift stabilization. They both have night mode and night mode time lapse. They both have audio zoom and pretty much all of the other features like Smart HDR4 and everything else. The only other differences aside from ProRes video, macro mode, and that telephoto lens with all of the added zoom capabilities is the ability to shoot in Apple ProRAW format, the ability to shoot night mode portrait shots, and also slightly better low light performance with both photos and videos. So the difference is pretty big for somebody like me who takes pictures and videos pretty much everywhere I go, and I'm constantly, recording something. I think it's a big difference for me between the 13 and the 13 Pro. But if you don't always take pictures and videos, then you may just be fine with the iPhone 13. But I think for $200, you're getting a heck of a lot with the Pro this year. All right, so now that we have the elephants out of the room, aka the display and the camera, we can now discuss some of the other more minor differences. So let's start with battery life. And the only reason I'd consider this minor when comparing these two is because the difference is not as big as it was last year. And that is a huge plus and a huge win for the regular iPhone 13. So I used both of these phones on and off for multiple days at a time, and the difference in battery life was almost always under an hour. I got better battery life on the iPhone 13 Pro consistently, despite the iPhone 13 having a larger physical battery. But again, the difference wasn't really anything major, and I would be able to get through almost an entire day on both phones. Now the 13 Pro Max is a whole other beast. This phone consistently netted me an additional 2 to 3 hours of battery life on a daily basis, which is nuts. So if you want the best battery life possible, go for the Pro Max. But I'm telling you right now, the battery life on the regular 13 is excellent, and I would not go for the Pro just for the battery life because they're both going to be very similar in that department. Now, as for the performance, this is another area that is usually not considered minor, but the difference in these two is pretty minor aside from one specific area. So both phones have the A15 Bionic chip inside, and they both perform practically identical in day-to-day usage, like using social media, web browsing, watching YouTube videos, things like that. But the difference between these two comes into play when you start gaming, and that's because the Pro has a 5-core GPU, while the 13 has a 4-core GPU, and that extra graphics performance is going to definitely help when playing intensive games like COD Mobile, PUBG, or even when editing and exporting videos in something like LumaFusion. But if you don't game or use intensive apps at all, you likely won't be able to tell a difference between these two. But when it comes to RAM management, you might notice a difference here. I know I have, and that's because the iPhone 13 has 4 gigabytes of RAM, while the 13 Pro has 6 gigabytes of RAM. And that extra 2 gigabytes goes a long way, especially on an iPhone with iOS and how well it manages that RAM. And I noticed that apps stay open significantly longer than they do on the iPhone 13. So for example, I like to play DraftKings, and when I go back and forth between the app and my Safari app to do my research, my DraftKings app would reload sometimes and I would lose my entire lineup and I would have to start over. It was super frustrating. Now granted, this has also happened on my iPhone 13 Pro once, but it's happened multiple times on the regular iPhone 13. So just keep that in mind. The 13 Pro is going to be superior if you multitask on your iPhone at all. All right, so with all of that being said, which iPhone 13 should you buy? And this year, I'd say that the Pro model is well worth the additional $200 if you care at all about the camera and video capabilities or that 120Hz refresh rate on the display. Not to mention the Pro has a better, more durable exterior shell as well with that stainless steel. The only thing you'd have to compromise on is the slightly heavier feel in the hand and in the pocket, because again, the 13 Pro is slightly heavier and you do have a bigger camera bump on the back. But again, to me and most people, that's not going to be a deal breaker. And this is the first year I've ever had such a strong lean in one direction. I almost always make a case for the base model, but this year, I honestly don't think I can, unless you just really don't want to spend the extra money, or if you just want to have, the phone only to text and web browse and that's pretty much it. That extra $200 though, it goes a long way with the Pro, and that would be the one I would recommend this year if you were to decide between the 13 and 13 Pro. If you have the extra money, I would definitely go for it, but if you can't afford it, honestly, I would just save up and wait until you can afford it, because that's how strong I feel about the Pro model this year over the regular iPhone 13. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you agree, if you disagree, tell me why, and I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on the 13 versus the 13 Pro. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up, and of course, make sure to subscribe for a lot more iPhone comparisons and reviews. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and thanks to Casetify again for sponsoring, and I'll see you soon.